Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special, unplanned episode of the Jankyard, the most culturally important podcast for Ashes Reborn, an extendable card game by Plaid Hat Games. We're normally here to talk to you guys about all things Ashes, news, meta, events, and in particular what we like to call open-minded deck building, but tonight is a little bit different. There was a news bomb dropped by the Shufflebus shortly after recording the last regular episode, so we're going to be discussing that as well as the future of the Ashes competitive scene. To do that, we have not one, but two guests tonight, pillars of the community, if you will, and we're so excited to hear what they have to say that we kicked Shmeny off the episode. And who are they, you ask? Well, we've got the adventurous Impossible German.
Hello, Jankyard listeners. I'm honored to be on here.
We've got the very metal Chaos Theory.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
And, of course, Killer Cactus and myself, The Treatment.
Yeah, we're still here.
Same old.
Yeah.
So welcome, guys. It's great to have you.
Yeah, Smindrix and I go way back to our Marvel Champions days, so I was really disappointed to find out that you guys killed him. I was just devastated.
Had to trim the fat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, and, you know, someone's got to make the tough decision.
I get it. Yeah. No, seriously, we appreciate you guys having us on. What's everybody drinking this evening? That's a good first question.
Oh, God. I forgot that you guys are the bar guys. I'm just getting water.
Ooh, nice.
Ooh.
Is it hard water?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Hard water.
I mean, I've had, you know, 2 beers and a couple shots and mixed drinks and stuff at the office Christmas party, so I calmed it down. I had to make sure I could actually talk for this podcast.
No, you didn't. That's unnecessary.
I did eye up a Christmas ale before I came downstairs, but I let it go and
prepare for another rant.
I'm just gonna sober up and actually talk.
My work Christmas party was last night, and I really, really should not drink tequila, but we went to a Mexican place, and that's pretty much what they had. And so when I got home and I got real sweaty and clammy feeling, I was like, man, tequila is even worse on me than I thought. And then my wife felt my skin and she was like, this is not tequila. And she temped me and I was at 102. So I stayed home from work sick today, and my winter edition Red Bull is the only thing keeping me conscious right now. So if this gets a little loopy, it's not a cocktail tonight. It's pure caffeine to keep the edge on. Yeah.
My Christmas party was supposed to be, was tonight, but I live out of the city and it started snowing today, a big storm, and my wife was just like, yeah, you should probably stay home. So I did, and I didn't bother going to the office.
Well, my Christmas party's tomorrow, so y'all have to wait till later to find out if I survive. But I'm drinking a sidecar tonight because it is what I had materials to make. So
the drink you can make.
There you go.
What's in a sidecar for people who have no idea?
Typically cognac, but I don't have cognac, so I use brandy, which is essentially the same thing. It just doesn't come from cognac. The location, triple sec and lemon juice, shaked with ice. And I added a little bit of my own simple syrup in there because it was a little too tart, so I balanced it out a little.
How would you compare it to Charlotte's Particle Shield?
Oh, not nearly as good, and didn't protect me from 1 damage. So,
all right, you heard it here first, everybody. The sidecar sucks.
Right?
Sidecar, there you go.
Yeah, didn't even draw a card.
I had the Godfather or a Godfather a couple weeks ago. That was pretty good. Scotch and amaretto.
Oh, I love amaretto.
Yeah, that was good. Well, Treatment, why don't you tell us what's going on tonight?
Yeah, so I mean, depending on when this episode actually gets released, depending on how much time I can co-opt from my wife to do the actual hard work. There are 2 events that are going on. So there's the Call-Off, which is heading into the finals. It will be Brian B versus Waves.
Ooh.
And should be super exciting to watch. The semifinals were excited to watch, and they're up on Jared Leupold, aka Clue's YouTube channel. So that's going to be fun. And then there's the Secret Santa tournament, which officially kicks off on the 19th. So that'll be next Monday, I believe. And that should be a ton of fun as well. Something to carry us through until 2023.
Yeah, that Secret Santa tournament is a really, really cool idea. I've got a super busy month, and so I wasn't able to make time for it. But the other reason that I didn't go in is I was pretty sure that somebody was going to make me some sort of insulting Xander deck with like no earthquakes or something. So I just it felt like having somebody else make my deck, given my history, would have been a little emotionally vulnerable for me. So I was a coward. I couldn't do it.
They just sent out the DMs, I think, today for who gets who in Secret Santa, and I now know who I am building a deck for. I will not reveal it because I don't know when this is going to air, but I am super duper excited to build this deck for this person.
That's awesome.
And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm going to have one way or another, I'm going to have some fun with it. I don't know if it's going to be awesome fun or like trolley fun, but there's going to be fun head.
Well, we're really, when you think about card games, like as a broad spectrum, this Secret Santa thing is such a cool fit for us because, one, Ashes is a game, and you guys know this better than anybody, like it's the whole basis behind your content. There's so much expression available to you in Ashes deck building. And when you combine that with the fact that our community is a little smaller and we kind of know each other's ticks for what we like to build and what we like to play, something like a Secret Santa tournament where you get to like see who you get and go, oh, I know exactly what to build for you. Like this is kind of one of the only places where something like that could really sing. And so I think it's really cool that that Carl and Lizzie have come up with this. Like it's a really cool idea for our community in particular, I think.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like uncomfortably vulnerable with the fact that I think every one of you right now could build the exact deck that I would build to take to this tournament. Like card for card, probably.
I mean, I'm hoping that part of it is going to be people building decks that, like obviously we listed our favorites, both in terms of Phoenix Born and card, but I hope it is not like, hey, I'm going to build something that you would just build or you would like to play. Like I do like the idea that there's going to be a little bit like pushing people maybe outside of their comfort zone, or at least showing them a different twist or combination of cards that they might not normally consider. And I think that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, so let's dive in to the deep end. It'll probably be a little bit heavy to start, and we got some stuff to finish on a high note. But the Shufflebus guys, they announced this week that they are ending their whole thing, the streaming of Ashes, as well as their coverage and running the tournaments. So that's a pretty big news bomb. What were your guys' first impressions? Did you watch the stream live? Did you watch the video on demand? Like, what do you guys think?
Unfortunately, Shufflebus always tends to stream like at the exact worst time for me to be able to participate. So I was driving home from work whenever they started. So I didn't watch the stream. I did watch some of the VOD. I didn't do the whole thing. I kind of scrubbed through and caught some important bits. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's sad. It's unfortunate. They put so much heart and work into what they did with Shufflebus that it's impossible to not feel bad for them, that it was losing momentum and that they were losing momentum and wanting to do it. So that's really a bummer, because I feel like there's been a lot of just incredible memories and really great games and great commentary on Shufflebus tournaments. Like, in particular for me, like I had so much fun playing in both Invitational and Worlds. It was just like really cool to play Ashes at that level. So I'm definitely bummed about it. I don't necessarily fully agree with everything that they were saying about like why it wasn't working and their take on like what the competitive meta should look like. But, you know, we all have different opinions. We all have different, you know, things we're bringing to the community. And it just seems like, you know, the sort of scene that they wanted to develop in our community just wasn't really quite gaining traction, at least the way they wanted it to. So, yeah, that's kind of my TLDR take on it. But
Yeah,
sure, yeah. Well, I mean, there's going to be some things I want to dive into on that. But German, what about you?
yeah. So kind of picking up where Jeremy left off there. I think just the nature of our discussion tonight is going to dive into some analysis on what was said in that VOD and you know, how Shufflebus as an institution accomplished its goals. And just before we get into any of that, I just want to say for me personally that like none of the differences of opinion or the like differing analysis that I have on what competitive ashes means uh, takes away from the achievements of Shufflebus.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
in any way, like when I think about the hours upon hours and the incredible effort that Jesse and Neil put into this community, it truly is irreplaceable. And it impacted so many people and enriched so many people's enjoyment of the game. And that is the first and foremost thing that I take away from Shufflebus ending is they were legends and nothing can change that. I'm with Jeremy. There's a lot of what they said that I don't see eye to eye with necessarily in terms of their analysis. But that has nothing to do with whether I think Shufflebus did what it set out to do and did it with passion, because when you look at that invitational, like how can you say that Shufflebus didn't do what it set out to do? Like that was completely peak Ashes, and I really think that's the core of what Jesse and Neil wanted. And if there's one thing that they take away from their time with us, I just hope they see what they did, because like that invitational and so many of the other events that they put on really did highlight the best of what this game is, and I think that's what they wanted fundamentally.
Yeah, and you know, if they're listening to this, I want their main takeaway from what I'm, you know, gonna say tonight to be that I'm incredibly thankful to them both
Yep.
for everything they did. Like, truly, super thankful. As someone who's like, you know, taken some initiative, I would say, to like really trying to develop this game's community, I still couldn't output what they were doing. Like I just
no way.
can't. They were very committed, and they outdid us on like how much they were willing to put into this community, the hours and everything. So thank you, Jesse and Neil, so much.
Yeah, Killer, before I share my thoughts, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo the thanks and the sentiments from all of that. I mean, I don't even know how competitive I would have got into Ashes without Shufflebus.
For real.
Right? Like I mean, when I played 1.0 and I played the Slam Jams and stuff, and I never like contended. And you know, when I got back into Ashes when Reborn came out, I think it was Shufflebus 3 by the time I was really back into it. And I didn't even try hard in Shufflebus 3. I think I played Vicky, and I messed around. Like I was nervous about it, right? It's like I playing this big competitive tournament, so I gave myself an excuse to not do well, and then kind of forced myself out of that mentality. You know, because like a lot of that was watching their streams, listening to them talk passionately about competitive Ashes, watching all the other games and the high level play and learning from those, and, you know, wanting to replicate that myself. And have played in, you know, all of the Shufflebuses since and gotten a lot better at the game a lot just due to them, right? So, I mean, that's really awesome. I'm sad to see it go. I felt a bit bad about it because I've talked about that, intimidation that I initially had and still do. I mean, to be honest, still do have, right, to this day. And I've talked to other people about it that are, afraid to get into competitive play. And I've always wanted that to come from a place of encouragement, right? Not a place of, if you're scared, don't do it. Like, I've talked to those people and said, like, don't worry about it. Just get in there. Like, that's how you get better. Get in there,
Absolutely.
Lose games, record them, watch yourself back, play on the stream so you can see, and don't just get over that fear, because that's the only way you improve. And, that's what I had to do, and did it and got better at the game and had a lot of fun along the way. So, I felt bad about that stuff because I know they were, that was one of the kind of points that they didn't want to be putting up that, intimidating feel. And I don't think they were. I think that was just a byproduct of the fact that Ashes has a few really, really good players. And they win a lot of games, right? because they're good at it. But if people don't get up there and play with them competitively, then, no one's going to challenge them. And you get someone like JK who, at first wasn't one of those players and is now winning everything. And because he put the time in, right? And refined his deck and did a heck of a job. So, I'm sad to see it go, but was very happy that, they were a part of the community, and it's probably on them that I got really into competitive Ashes. So I thank those guys for that.
Yeah, it's very similar for me, because my first, foray into online events period was actually Jankfest. And I did that because I had sort of, I'd been watching the Team Covenant streams that they had been putting on during the pandemic and when Reborn was announced. And then I was like, oh, this seems fun. And I just played a couple games with a friend, and I didn't know, like, it just seemed like the community was so tight and small, and it was intimidating even just to join the Discord for me to put out my own opinions on cards and make a deck and send it out to everyone and see what the feedback was going to be. And then Shufflebus, the new season, came around, and it was, for me, it was like, well, I don't think I'm going to do well, but it was like the, main way of playing in an organized way online. It was, it was a reason to get in with the community. It was a reason to test my mettle. It was a reason to just, schedule games, make sure that I started getting that practice, because otherwise it was casual pickup. And where Ashteki and casual pickup games is now was not the same it was like even a year ago. Like, there has been a growth in the community. So Shufflebus was the way if you wanted regular games that weren't, carousel or draft to join. And I mean, I've had a lot of contrarian views with Neil or to a lesser degree Jesse about cards or what competition is, what it means to be intimidating or welcoming, but none of that, like, in my view, has ever been on a personal basis. It's always been with sort of the whole view of, like, we are all, I mean, for the most part, we're all subscribers to the PDP model, which naturally means we are invested in the growth of the game. I know it's been oft repeated by different people that they feel this is the best deck construction game, myself included. And so we're all like, we want this to work. We want this to succeed. We want it to grow. We want it to be what we all believe it to be. And we just have different opinions or approaches to those solutions. And for me, the biggest thing when I watched the video on demand afterwards was, it was just sad that it had become personal in some regards. Like the arguments that have bubbled up over the last few months obviously were taking a personal effect, and I'm definitely a contributor to that. So I feel bad that it was affecting them in that way. Um, and so for me, it's incredibly sad that like these, Jesse and Neil, such pillars of the community, like that, how much they did, felt at the end. I think it was Jesse said he felt like it was no longer providing him joy. And even Neil said, like, doing the regular streamings on Tuesdays and Thursdays became more of a chore. And that's really unfortunate. I respect, that happens to people. And obviously I respect the decision to leave, because you shouldn't do something that is no longer bringing you joy. But it's heartbreaking when you see, like, when you put so much effort and you believe in something so strongly and then it doesn't pan out.
Yeah. And, it's hard not to, let things be personal whenever you care this much about a game. And,
I was just thinking the same thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Like, we've all been there, and I know, like, I've been there with, like, just conversations in the Discord where things get heated up a little bit, and I'm finding myself like, man, I'm getting kind of riled up. And it's just because, like, we all really, really, really care about this game a lot. And it's the nature of it, because it's a game that is held on, by a select few people who are willing to keep investing in it so that it will keep going. And there's not really been another card game quite like this in this situation. Like, there's certainly been card games where, like, a small community is, they're the ones investing in it, they're paying for product, and, like, they're keeping it going. But we, like, quite literally have a written contract, basically, that says, like, we'll keep this game going as long as we keep buying it. And so there's a really intense personal investment aspect, I think, to Ashes that is missing from other games. And the fact that we're a small, tight-knit community, I don't want to get, like, too, cheesy about it, but I think we do tend to be like a family, and, like, families have heated arguments and disagreements, and it just happens. It is unfortunate, though, that they felt so burned out, but yeah.
So, I mean, so one thing, I guess, we all know that this is a small community, and it's something that I continually think about. And I know it's been discussed sort of in the Discord before, but for anyone listening, what do you guys think is the reason that the competitive scene either never grew, or it sort of, like, because we've seen AshCon events where, from Dijon's statistics, that there's a lot more games, and the PvE announcement, there's all of a sudden been a lot of new faces to the community. And I'm just wondering, like, for me, I think I struggle sometimes with the same thoughts that Neil and Jesse did, which is like, why isn't this working? Why are more people not joining? It can't just be, I don't think, an intimidation factor. Like, why were there, used to be 30 or 40 people in sort of the regular tournaments, and then more recently just dropped to around 20-ish. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Yeah.
I'll start. And again, this is the caveat that I gave the last time that I started talking, and I'm gonna give it again. There are aspects of that question. There are aspects of that question where I just don't see the game the way that Jesse and Neil saw it. But that disagreement does not reflect how I feel about what Shufflebus accomplished in any way whatsoever. So with that caveat out of the way, I'm just going to speak really frankly about how I see competitive Ashes differently than they did. If I had to point to a reason that the competitive game didn't grow, for lack of a better term, my analysis, my guess, is that the way that Ashes competitive will grow was defined by Shufflebus and by Jesse and Neil. And I don't necessarily think that their definition completely fit the community that Ashes has and the game that Ashes is. That's the summary of how I feel about it.
Okay, so what is the game that Ashes is?
I think that's a big that's the biggest question you've ever asked on your cast, and you know it. The I want to start by talking about what it's not. It's not Magic the Gathering. It's not Flesh and Blood. Um, for a lot of the reasons that Jeremy already talked about, it's so different from any of the games of the other competitive card games out there. And I would always kind of bristle a little bit when Jesse and Neil would use those other games as a reference point, because I really think that is only helpful to a point when you're talking about Ashes. Fundamentally, because of PvP, because of the nature of deck building, because of the release model, like because of so many things, Ashes is just very much its own thing. And I always felt like there were aspects of how Jesse and Neil approached building the competitive game that didn't fully reflect an understanding of what Ashes is. And that's speaking really frankly, and I know that sounds harsh, and I swear I don't mean it to sound as harsh as it may have sounded coming out of my mouth. But there were some things they said in that VOD that I just didn't see. Like, they said that they felt that Ashes was fundamentally a more casual game, and I don't necessarily see it that way. I think that doesn't reflect a full appreciation of the incredible competitive lineage that this game has. Like, the skill cap in Ashes is so high. It's so high. And when you look at people who have won tournaments in this game and who have made an impact on the competitive game, you're really talking about players who have just played their rear ends off and have gone into tournaments and just absolutely given it their all, and it's their piloting that has gotten them to the top spot. And so when that's so fundamentally true about Ashes, that piloting really is everything, I think looking at the game and analyzing it as being a more casual space, that just doesn't really jive for me. Another thing that they pointed out in the VOD that I didn't necessarily see eye to eye with was they felt that PvE had some negative implications for the long-term competitive game. I have felt that one of the biggest obstacles to competitive Ashes has been getting new players built up to it, kind of like Cactus was saying. And I think that Red Rain's mode is going to be a huge step forward for competitive Ashes in that regard, because it's so tough to dive into these tournaments. It's so intimidating, and being able to have a mode like Red Rain's that is not as intimidating, is not as competitive, but still really reflects the fundamentals of what Ashes is and how to play it well. I think that's going to be an amazing tool to get people into competitive. And so, those are just a couple of the things that they analyze that I don't necessarily see eye to eye with. I felt that there was a lack of optimism in what Ashes could be as a competitive space in what they said. And while I totally get that we're never going to be as big of a game competitively in terms of numbers and things like that, as some of the other games, I just don't believe that numbers tell the whole story about what a game's competitive scene looks like. We have a competitive scene that is friendly. We have a competitive scene that has some absolutely jaw-dropping builders and pilots. And we have a competitive scene that loves the game. And those things, to me, reflect a brighter future than tournament attendance does. That's just how I see it.
Right. Okay. So I'll punt this question over to Chaos. How do you define a competitive scene in Ashes, because I think that's where there's a lot of difference. And I know that I think this was something that Jesse or Neil mentioned ages ago, because like you said, they make a lot of references to other games where promoting the competitive scene sort of from like a top-down approach will attract newer players. And then there's the opposite view, which German has sort of expressed, which is like getting people as like a ramp up into the game period, and then building it. And sometimes I do wonder whether like Ashes is just there's a certain plateau almost that is so hard to break through to get really good that can be a turnoff. But like what makes a good competitive scene?
Well, I think we can look at the examples that they give for successful competitive games, and where those games came from, and kind of break down the top-down approach that you were talking about. Like Magic the Gathering didn't start with big tournaments. It started at kitchen tables. It started with people like and their friends like breaking open packs and like being surprised about like, what does this do? How do you even make this deck? I don't know. I'm just gonna put this in deck because this is a cool card. Like, and it evolved from there. It started with a bunch of nerds like collecting cool looking cards and building silly decks. And like even you listen to Richard Garfield talk about Magic the Gathering. It's so far removed from what Magic the Gathering is. Like his vision for what he wanted Magic the Gathering to be is so astronomically different than what Magic is right now, like with the competitive scene, the competitive play. And that because he's set out and made other games that he wanted to be more like what he thought Magic could have been. With like Keyforge, for example, like he was like, for me, this is me paraphrasing, I don't know exact quotes, but he's like, for me, like, the best part about playing Magic is this idea of like discovery and this idea of like not having everything figured out and not having everything being optimized, and just kind of taking a fundamentally unoptimized collection of weird cards with interesting and finding synergies with them and like making that work for you, right? And that's what Keyforge was built out of. And I always got the sense that Keyforge was a more pure vision of what he wanted Magic to be than Magic was.
Sounds like a Koloff.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, like he's, and if you've watched Richard Garfield play Magic, he's not very good at it. Like as far as like competitive Magic, right? Like if you take a game, any game, especially card games, but any game, and you really like focus on being as extremely competitive as you can, as hyper optimizing your stuff and everything, it breaks down eventually, And we see that with like ban lists and restricted and all this other kinds of different formats, rotation. There's all these tools that designers and developers use to like put a stopgap in on the optimization of the game so that it will stay fresh, right? So anyway, that's Magic. But then let's take a look at a different game that has taken the top-down approach. With like saying we really want to set out from the very beginning to be the most competitive we can be, to really establish the competitive scene. And that game is Flesh and Blood. And Flesh and Blood right now, like it exploded. Like it extremely popular, the biggest contender to the big three in decades, right?
Yeah.
And that game has a serious problem with onboarding new players and getting like people to take that next step into competitive play. But it also has like a problem of like just like keeping people invested in competitive, because there's a ton of people playing Flesh and Blood right now that just they feel like dragged down by how competitive the game actually is. And like some of them, many of them, just want to play a fun game. They want to go to casual meetups on a weekend, jam out some games, try some unoptimized decks, and have fun. And it just doesn't seem like the community as a whole of Fab really wants to like emphasize that. And I think it comes from the top down. Again, it comes from the people who are making the game, the people who are investing the most in the game, the people who are making the content for the game. It's been pushed from the very, very top down as like, this is a truly competitive, like we want the tournament scene to be awesome. We want a national circuit. We want a world circuit. We want a $1 million tournament. And have they succeeded? Yes. Does Fab have some serious issues with like, the more casual player base just falling off and people getting burned out? Yeah, it does. So with all that said, when I look at Ashes, I think about like, how do you develop a competitive scene for a game that has, between 50 and 100 people in a Discord that are active on a regular basis? The first thing that comes to mind is that we can't achieve the level of competitive play and competitive, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just we can't achieve that environment that Fab has. We can't achieve that environment that Magic has. They've got way, way, way bigger player base, way more people on the playtest team, way more people designing cards, a ton more money flowing through it. There's just so many things that they're doing that we can't do, for one.
When you say can't, are you talking about in terms of like hyper optimization and like, for lack of a better term, like solving the game?
No, that's part of it. That is part of it. That like, I think what Jesse and Neil wanted was like, they wanted to have this meta analysis that like these other games have. This like, this gauntlet of decks that people test against, and like, yeah, we're gonna test against these decks. We're gonna break down like, why is this deck so good? Why is it winning? Let's find out. Let's break it down. Let's counter it. We want to see counters develop. And the thing is, like, you've got like 3 or 4 people in this competitive community that are interested in that level of testing, that level of optimization. Maybe like 6 to 10, right? And the rest of us, and I'm including me in that, like, we like being competitive, but that's like a level beyond what we want to like invest, And I think if you had the player base, the numbers, that would be different. Like if we had 1,000 people active in the Discord at all times, and Netrunner level numbers, maybe, what I'm saying? Like there would be that, I think. But just because of the sheer numbers, I don't think we can quite get there. And just from a philosophical viewpoint, like I think that Ashes has always sort of appealed more towards the casual player base, more towards the kitchen table player base. It's been marketed more as a board game than it has been a competitive card game. The precons, the way that it's distributed, the way people tend to engage with the game regularly is so far removed from like Shufflebus level tournaments. And there was never, in my mind anyway, we didn't have a bridge, One of the things I was talking about with I can't remember who it was the other day. I was talking about this after the announcement. I said, like, you had 2 options when it comes to engaging with Ashes. You have like the first 5 league casual pickup games where you just like, hey, I want an opponent, and then I'm playing a reconstructed deck, or I'm playing like a modified precon, or maybe I just built my first deck. I just want to, get to know some people and play some games. And then you had Shufflebus, and it's like this massive, wide gap between these 2 levels of play, and there wasn't really a good onboarding ramp. And I think the problem ultimately, with the way Shufflebus was trying to develop the competitive community, came down to the fact that they wanted to push the they wanted to brute force the competitive scene into Ashes. And I think we needed more of those bridges. We needed more of those, like, more ways to accommodate people, more ways to be accessible, to get people to be able to, like, you know, like, take small steps in that direction. Learn the game. We all know that Ashes is a very high skill game with very small margins for error. Why, I don't know why we weren't, thinking about, like, how do we give people, stepping stones towards getting to the ultimate competitive instead of just diving right in.
You've hit so many topics. I'm trying to keep them in my head because they're so interesting and things that I want to dive into. No, it's great. Honestly, it's a lot of things that I think do come up regularly or sometimes don't get talked to in depth. So I was perfectly happy to just hear your thoughts, but I want to come back to some of those. I'm just going to let Killer sort of, like, do you have anything to add in terms of what you think the competitive scene is or could be or should be in Ashes?
So I don't know how much I should talk because I don't want to turn this into a debate podcast.
No.
Because I mean,
just like you,
to be honest, I agree with a lot of what Neil and Jesse said. I mean, I watched the VOD, I listened to all of it. I think they made a lot of really good points. And, so have German and Chaos in the last 20 minutes too. But I do think that there's just not enough spikes around here. And that's in order to have a truly competitive game, right? There's just not enough of them. And you guys just said the same types of things, right? There's just not a lot of players that are interested in that level of engagement with the competitive game. Now, why is that, right? I think there's a few reasons. And Chaos just touched on one of them. Number one, I mean, Plaid Hat Games is a board game company, right? Like, I know those guys.
Yeah.
And like they love board games. They have these, lore-rich, story-rich, decision-driven games. That's what they do, and that's how they market things. And I think it has been kind of marketed that way, right? Not as a competitive card game. I mean, even Summoner Wars, which is another card game and is bigger than Ashes, is a board game at heart, even. And it's kind of marketed that way. And then, so you look at, like, again, like Chaos said, the people who are making the game and the people who are distributing it. I mean, you have Plaid Hat and you have Team Covenant. And, I've watched the Covenant streams too, and they're great. But, I mean, that's a casual setting, right? Like, that's not a competitive setting. And that's where, when you talk about the top-down thing, I mean, that's what's coming from the top. Right, is that kind of the attitude and thought and push for the game. So, I mean, I think that's who you're going to get playing the game when you do it that way. So I think that contributes quite a bit to it. And I'm going to ask a question. I don't know anything about Flesh and Blood. Is it other than it's a card game, is it a LCG or is it a TCG?
It's a collectible card game.
It's a collectible card. Okay. So,
yep.
So here's the other thing about, that Magic is a collectible card game. Pokemon's a collectible card game. Flesh and Blood's a collectible card game, right? Those games cost money. I mean, those games cost serious money to play and to play at a high level. People that...
And to make.
Yeah. So, I play Pokemon, and if I'm going to get the cards, like... if I'm going to pay the money to get the cards and buy packs and stuff, I mean, I'm going to play hard because I spent some money on these darn things, right? If we're really getting there. I mean, Ashes cost me $30 a quarter, and I've got every single card in the game, a full playset of it. So, I mean, that's why there's, Ashes scratches the deck building itch for me a little more than the competitive itch, even though I try and play at the highest competitive level as long as I'm using something I made, because I'm, I have too much pride. But it's such a good deck building game because I have all of the cards. I have every single card I could ever want. I don't have to go buy them. I don't have to do any. I just have them, right? And I can make whatever deck I want all the time.
You don't have to keep up with buying all the time to remain competitive either.
Right.
If you miss
also true.
A release in Ashes, you're not I can't play anymore.
Yeah, but you don't have the problem of a TCG where, if I go to a meetup somewhere to play Pokemon, right, and I've spent a bunch of money buying booster packs and stuff, it's hard to spend all that money and then just get your butt kicked by somebody that's playing a top tier deck all the time. And it's not a big deal in Ashes because I don't have that kind of monetary investment in what I've got. I think that's really what it boils down to, is just the whole presentation of the game. And they were very clear, Isaac, this goes all the way back to him. I mean, his original vision was I don't want to make a CCG. I don't like the fact that I have to dump a ton of money into those things. I want to make an LCG. I want to make an expandable card game where, all of the cards are available, and hopefully you're not going to open up a pack and 8 of the cards are complete garbage and 3 of them might see competitive play. Obviously we have our coaster cards that in Ashes too, but it's not nearly to the level of, 85% of the Pokemon cards I have are complete trash that I'll never use.
Right.
And that's the nature of a TCG, and that's not what we have here. So
right.
Those are the arguments of just the general card collectible aspect of it versus having all the cards as well.
But I think that kind of game promotes a more hyper competitive scene, just because in order to really play the game, you have to be kind of invested in it. And can you buy the precons and screw around with your buddies? Yeah, but that's not really how, you're not getting anything out of the game by doing that. And that's where Ashes differs. You can get quite a bit out of playing a precon game of Ashes. You get pretty close to what, you don't get the same experience, obviously, especially if you use some of the decks that don't really work. But if you use a couple of the stronger precon decks, you get a pretty good, Ashes play experience.
Yeah.
And that's it's just not the same. And I think those are the kind of things that inhibit it from really having a competitive scene. And the other things, and I wish I have done a better job of this, and I hope that our podcast going forward can do some more of this, and we've tried to with some of this deck building stuff, but I don't know that, and this goes to what you guys were saying about the bridges between coming into the game and getting to the top level. There's not enough information about how to be good at this game.
Right.
And it's not it's not simple. There's a lot of nuance. The sequencing is that term gets thrown around every once in a while on Discords and stuff.
It's a loaded term. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. It took me forever, and I still don't fully grasp this concept, but it's taken me forever to understand what a good attack in this game is.
Absolutely.
I still don't know half the time. I'm sweating when I'm playing.
Me neither, bro.
Do I swing or do I not?
That's the that thing. What is a good attack? That Matt Bowers, Carl, Brian B. Those guys know what a good attack is. They make every single good attack.
And I feel like JK would also know what a good attack was if he attacked.
Oh, JK just plays burn.
Just burn him out.
No, I'm kidding. That's total. Yeah, that's total kidding. He knows exactly what it means. But
yes, he does.
But that's the thing. You come into this game, and if I sit down and play against a new player, you can tell right away. I'll look at a board state and be like, okay, they should attack my guy right now with this, and they don't do it, and it's because they don't understand that part of the game.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
There's not enough of that type of information. Like here is how it's not just the cards you put in your deck. Here's how to pilot, and here's how and why these players are so good. Here are the things that they do. There's just not enough of that.
No, there's not. So when I hear like all of us talk, I think that there is like a little golden nugget that is the distillation of kind of what we think. Like, I think that there is a thing that the four of us and Jesse and Neil and Schmin, like, I think that there is a nugget that all of us could agree on and put our names on the line and sign it. And it's that Ashes, from the bottom up and the top down, is fundamentally a different game than the other competitive card games on the market. And I think all of us would agree on that. I think the operative question becomes like, what do you do with that information? Like, because for Jesse and Neil, it reflected a disappointment. Like, they wanted Ashes to reflect some of those aspects of the other games, and they wanted to like push it towards it. And when they put all the effort into it and it didn't end up panning out, they made the decision that it wasn't joyful for them anymore. And that's totally respectable. But, speaking frankly, I'm really glad that Ashes doesn't share full DNA with those other experiences, because frankly, those other games have burned me time and time again. And I don't want to spend all that money, and I don't want to sweat that hard. And so I think, the question for me becomes like, can I love competitive Ashes for what it is? And for me, the answer is like, hell yes, I can. Like, absolutely I can.
I mean, both can be true though, right? Like you can love what it is and still want more, or want I think both worlds can coexist. There can be the more casual scene, there can be the more competitive scene, and so I look at it as you have to come at it from both sides, but primarily it has to come from the top. So I think, and I don't know this for sure, I don't want to put words in Neil and Jesse's mouth, but if I was in their position, I would, I won't say too heavily, I won't say resentful, but I would be a little bit frustrated with the lack of official support from Plaid Hat for whatever those reasons are. When you see AshCon once a quarter be put on, and Nick, comes on the Discord and he's posting about it, and there is that official word that comes out that this is our tournament, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot more people who all of a sudden pop out of the woodworks that are not, regular active players. And for like Jesse and Neil to be the de facto tournament scene, to be the de facto organizers and streamers for all this content, I can only imagine how frustrating it would be to not, I don't know, maybe be given that official like seal of approval, even if it was just like an article or something, like a thing that says in association or in partnership, or like the way there's a big kerfuffle with Nintendo and Panda and whatever, but like just having the company that designs the game saying these are our guys.
Yeah.
So anything that they run is considered official. I think that would do a ton. And, that's ignoring the possibility for prize support or whatever. Just like the officialness of it would have done a lot for that. And so I see that as a bit of frustration. And then equally, again, from Plaid Hat, but from the ground up, we're talking about the difficulty to onboard players and to ramp up. And I know that this come up like every few months, like how can we create a better resource for new players? Like, we've mulled around the idea of community members creating a website that would just be like, a wiki of all these things that we have to sort of learn along the way, but putting it out and having it as a resource for new people to read. And I think that when we compare Ashes to a game like chess, and I don't know many other games, but like the amount and volume of material that you can read and learn from, right? Because there's only so much you can learn from just a stream. No, this is no shame on Shufflebus or Inquisitor or Clue. Like, watching replays has a lot of value, but actual instructional videos or instructional material to say how to evaluate things, that is a lot more rare or disparate across a variety of sites and not necessarily easy to track down unless you've been on the Discord for a while, and you look through 10 channels and check through 500 pins in each channel, right? Like it's just everywhere. And I think that makes it really hard to get into the game and pass the pre-con stage.
Yeah.
Well, you have to have people who want to make that content and who are motivated to do it, and it's not easy to maintain motivation to do something like that when your potential audience for it is like, 20 people or something,
Oh, yeah,
so like,
for sure.
So there's that, but I agree with you. It is difficult. And like what Killer was saying earlier was just like, what is a good attack in Ashes? That is an insanely hard question to answer. There's so many variables. There's so many like instinctual things that you learn over time. It's not easy to just put into a nice, succinct little package and give it to people in content. So it's tough. But, I do have a couple things before we get too far removed from them that I wanted to say. For one, like not getting Plaid Hat official support. And I don't mean for this to sound, mean or anything, but just like what we were talking about with top down, right? What the company cares about. What is Plaid Hat? How do they view Ashes and what do they care about? It's been pretty clear what Killer Cactus was saying. Like, they are a board game company. They have seen that this game tends to engage with a more casual audience. It appeals to a lot of like people who don't normally dive deep into competitive card games. So it could just be simply that Plaid Hat's vision for the game wasn't lining up quite perfectly with Neil and Jesse's vision for what competitive Ashes should look like. And so like they're just like, we appreciate what you're doing here, but we don't want to put our stamp of approval on this necessarily, to put our name behind it necessarily. It could just be that. And sure. That sucks. That's frustrating. I get it, especially when you pour your heart and soul into something like that. Has got to hurt. But it's also understandable, and it's a reasonable thing. Like, they're a business. They have a market that they're trying to reach, and this just wasn't it, The Magic the Gathering and fad professional players who are, driving or flying across the country to play in $1 million tournaments are not the type of people they're trying to reach with Ashes. It's just, kind of how it goes. But
and I think you see that with one OP kit in 2 years of Reborn.
Yeah.
It's not a priority. It's kind of what we make of it.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily. I know what you're saying. I'm also very frustrated. I'm very frustrated.
Yes,
that
me too.
There hasn't been more OP kits. Like that frustrates even me. But that's a whole other kind of thing. But one other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is like a couple of things they said in the video. One thing that Jesse said is that I'm only very briefly going to touch on this because it's, getting into a topic that's been beat to death. He mentioned at one point that like the community wouldn't want to play in an event where Three-Eyed Owl is unchained, and that's why the competitive scene can't work. I want to just come out and say real quick, regardless of Three-Eyed Owl, I don't think that any balance changes or OP rules or anything like that was ever the true barrier for the competitive scene to grow. I just don't think it is. Simply because every game has them. Every game has balance updates that make people angry and OP rules that people don't agree with. That it's just the nature of the beast. And I don't think that's why. But the other thing Jesse said that I didn't necessarily agree with is that he said it doesn't seem like the Ashes community wants a competitive scene. And I don't think that's true. I think we do want one. I just don't think it looks quite like what they thought it should look like. I do think we want to compete. I see this. Like, I see people get really excited about Shufflebus tournaments. I see people get really excited about Ashes International League and really excited about Gen Con and discussing the decks and breaking down, like, why is JK so dang good? Why does he keep winning? Like, what's the secret sauce of these decks? How do we beat them? Like, we do care about these things. It's just that the group of people that do care about these things is so small, and our player base is so small. And I just don't think it's, going to necessarily, and it might one day, who knows? I just don't think it's necessarily going to reach quite the grandiose level that, maybe everyone wants it to reach.
No, but I mean, like, it's a matter of numbers.
Yeah,
right?
It's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
Exactly.
See, I don't know if that's true.
I think you can get to a few hundred people or a couple hundred people or even 100 people in a tournament with a community our size.
Yeah, I think so.
It's, and it's just a matter of, like, how do you get there? How do you promote that? How do you encourage that? How do you make people comfortable, in terms of diving into that type of level?
My point wasn't to say we can't reach that. I think we can. I think there are steps we need to take to get there. There's an in-between, like I was saying earlier with building bridges.
Right.
And stepping stones. Mostly what I was trying to say is there are a lot of people who really care about competitive Ashes. I don't think it's that we don't want it. Yeah.
But I think it goes back to what you said earlier, where there's just not enough people that are willing to commit the type of time and effort into getting to that ultra competitive level.
Right.
That's the difference. And, like, I mean, we want to compete, we want to have tournaments, and we want to try and win. But I mean, do we really? Like, I think that's to me that was the question they were raising on the VOD. It's like, we see people in these tournaments, but, like, outside of a couple people, I mean, no one's in there grinding, and no one's in there really, putting in the time to test this stuff. I mean, I know I don't. Like, you go on Ash Techie, and, like, Tuxedo is playing against himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like banging out this stuff, and that's why he's really good. And JK did the same thing, and, like, I mean, if this was another game, this is what they were saying. If this was another game, everybody would be doing that.
Well,
and that's what they're looking for, and, like, that's what they were calling a competitive scene. I think, and it's just like what you guys said earlier. I mean, that what we have and what they were looking for are two different things, I think. But I get what they're saying. Like, if people were really, really trying to win, then that would be the stuff that they would be doing. And, we can talk about the reasons why that doesn't happen all day.
I want to speak to that a little bit real quick.
I disagree a little bit with that too, but yeah, go ahead,
I do
Jeremy.
too. So I think it becomes because there really are varying definitions, in my opinion, of what trying to win even means. Like, if your definition of trying to win is, like, lots of games against yourself and half the field at the Invitational on, like, Hope and Brennan, if that is if your definition of trying to win is that narrow, then yeah, sure, we don't want to win. But, like, speaking frankly, I don't mean this in any personal way, Cactus, at all, but, like, it's just so hard for me to look at what happened at the Invitational and go, this is a community that doesn't want to try to win. Like, people brought heat and people played really, really hard. And so I think it's maybe a semantic thing where it's like, how do you evaluate what it means for a specific community to want to win and to be competitive? And maybe it just looks a little bit differently for our community based on some of the things that we've already talked about, how Ashes is different than it looks for some other communities. But I just can't get to a point where I look at what we've accomplished with competitive Ashes and go, this is not truly what it means to be competitive. Like, I think it's just different for us than it is for some other games, maybe.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think people are there wanting to win, but I mean, go back and look at the Discord messages leading up to Worlds. I mean, how many people were like, I just submitted an untested deck, let's go. Like, there was a bunch of that. And it's like that would never happen in the Worlds of anything else.
Right.
But
there's not as much at stake.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. Now,
yeah.
So like, speak to that for a second, right? Like, there's that, because that's one of the contributing factors to this, is that
right.
there's just not that much at stake. And that, I mean, Planet doesn't have the resources to do that now. Mm-hmm. But even if they did, and so for instance, it's at Gen Con for Summoner Wars, they had a tournament there, and they offered $1,000 to the person that won that tournament. Right? Like, I mean, that's some incentive to go win, right? Like, right. To go win $1,000, and like 30 people came to that. So like, it's even still like when
they need to start playing Summoner Wars.
Right.
Yeah, but like, look at AshCon, where the prize was dice and alt art puppets, and the discussion blew up as to like what it meant to be competitive and what you were going to bring, and like everyone's like, well, no holds barred, screw this, I'm bringing,
yeah, because I want the dice. Forget the $1,000. I need those shiny divine dice.
No. I was in Schmindrix's DMs. I was in his DMs when I heard about those translucent divine and sympathy and time dice, and I was like, all right, bud, Operation Toxicity. Like, and Schmindrix and I literally tested for AshCon because we were like, I'm getting these dice. Like,
yeah. So, but I mean, so there is some of that, but like, what I'm saying is, Plaid had offered $1,000 for a tournament of their biggest game, and they got 30 people. Like, it. So to me, that's like, that's a marketing thing. Then it goes back to that. So I don't know if there was $1,000, would we all try and do? I still don't think we would. I think we would do the same types of things that we're doing now. Honestly.
Yeah, probably would.
But the other thing is, and I wanted to say this just before we get too far away from the topic, about how much of a priority it is for them to support the competitive scene. I honestly believe, and I'm not going to speak for these guys, but from what I know of them, I don't think that they don't see it as a competitive game. And maybe it's not a priority, but that's not because they don't want it to be a competitive game. It's just that it's not their biggest game to like. I mean, they don't have enough resources to throw everything at it. I think if they did, they would.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, I think Nick especially, like, I think Nick knows exactly what Ashes can be at a competitive level, and if he had the ability to throw everything at it that it needs to, he would do it. I don't think they're purposely not doing it. Like, I don't think it's their vision, because they're the type of company they are, that they don't want Ashes to be competitive that way. I think it's just they just can't, right? Or with what they have.
I want to say real quick too, like with the, the building blocks of like getting a community, like growing a community, and like getting people to like take the baby steps into competitive instead of just diving right in. We've had a ton of people come in through the Discord and that show interest in the game on a competitive level, and they don't stick around. And they'll come in, they'll be like, what are the meta decks? Like, what's everyone trying to beat? And we show them. It's like, hey, these are the decks. These are the methods we tried to use and stuff. And then we're like, okay, Like I'm just getting started here. What, they'll share a deck list and like we'll be like, oh, you're running 2 ready spells of everything. That's not right. And just like kind of walking through and stuff. But like ultimately, I think not too many of those people stick around. And I think that's part of the reason why the competitive scene isn't growing too, is just that, again, I know I'm just hitting on this a lot, and we'll get into why I'm hitting on this a lot here in a minute. But like, I really feel like there's not that gap is not bridged between the level of play that we have in our competitive Ashes scene and the new people who are showing up on a daily basis. I mean, we've had, 35 new people join the Discord in the last 15 days. Like, there's a lot of people coming in through here, and not everyone's going to like read the whole Discord, but like there's been new people showing up and new people asking like, what's competitive Ashes look like? I want to play online. What does this look like? And I just, I feel like it's either the deep end or the shallows, and there's not much in between. And so that's something I think we need to address before the competitive scene in Ashes is going to grow. Not grow exponentially, maybe, but before it's going to grow, period.
Yeah, you'd like to see the graph going up and to the right,
Right, yeah.
For sure.
I think that one problem I've consistently had, and, my personality is more on the stubborn side, so it fueled me rather than turned me away like it could others, is that there's, in the same way that Neil and Jesse and others like Carl have said, that there's an issue with the community sentiment towards not being competitive, like not playing just the best decks. I've also found the opposite problem where, especially when I started, it was, if you're not playing these decks, you don't care about winning, or you're not trying hard enough, or whatever, which is like a shutdown of exploration and the journey. And it's like, you won't know in any competitive meta, you don't know what the next thing is going to be, or what this, like, even in a community our size, you're not going to know necessarily what all of the solutions are, much less one solution to a given deck, a given card, a given problem. Like Neil had mentioned JK, and the fact that his deck, Brennan, and the cards he used are like, just after Reborn. Like, none of it is really any new things, and that should have been discovered a long time ago. And at the same time, there's someone like Redentor who brought Jericho bunnies to the last pod event, and did really well with it. But prior to that, there was a constant downplay, or not like being insulting, but just saying like, oh, Jericho's bad, or this will never work.
Right.
And even when I joined, like, that was why I played Noah. I kept hearing like, oh, he's bad. Without, an understanding of the game, you can't really understand why either. But just the fact that, like, don't even bother because he's garbage tier. And for me, that fuels me to be like, no, I want to explore. I want to test and iterate and find. And unfortunately, I just don't have as much time to dedicate. But like, I think that type of attitude in the opposite way can shut down or close the bridge to go from new to pro.
Dude, it's done it for me. Like, it's burned me out on wanting to play competitive Ashes, that kind of discourse. And like, just today, Brian shared this Auric list that he was like, this Auric is like seriously good, and I almost brought it to Worlds. And Carl replied like, Auric is very good, can confirm. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, what? And that's the kind of stuff that gets me super psyched to play Ashes, like at a competitive level. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, let's get into like what is not being played right now and why. Like, I want to know what the best deck is that no one's playing. That excites me as a player. It doesn't excite everyone. Spikes don't get super excited about that.
It's horse cheese. That's the answer. Now you know.
Johnnies get crazy excited about that. But like, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's turned me away at times. There have been periods in Ash's competitive history where it's just like dominated the conversation that this is busted, you can't beat it. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be a part of the conversation anymore. You know? Like at that point, I'm done. I'm out.
There has to be all like the trifecta of personalities in the competitive scene to make it shine, because you take a look at and I'm not gonna to go back in history and definitively find out, but as far as I know, Schmendrix was the one who sort of created Realm Walker hunting weapons, like that deck, and I think he had done it in Sambali, and even at the time it was like, oh, this is strong, but in an open list event, if it's coming, it's just basically janky. And then of course the cap runs it at the Invitational in Brennan, and I mean he was like 4-0, 5-0 until semifinals. It's like, so you need that progression, you need that exploration. That's largely what Killer and I have always talked about, because Killer puts out so many decks and it to me inspires ideas, and then inevitably some of those turn out really great, like horse cheese. And it would be interesting to see people believe in those ideas more and bring them to competitive, and not get shut down being like, well, because this hasn't been seen before, because it's not currently viewed as the top 3, it means you're not being true to the competitive spirit.
Right.
That
exactly.
Deck, that Brennan Realm Walker deck that Kat brought that was so out of left field, that deck contributed the loss that kept Carl on Hope Creepers out of the top 4. And if that isn't a monument to how important experimentation is, I don't know what is.
Well, and Matt Bowers, like, people have talked about Dreamlock and Double Class Cost Allies not being quite good enough, and Spin Down being more, as not really a full strategy or even really that helpful. And then he brings Dreamlock and Dream Fracture into the lowest health PB, and he was the only one to take away the win from JK.
Dude, this is why, like, there's a lot of people we could say like, oh, this is the best player in the game. Bryant, just absolutely incredible player. Carl, obviously super accomplished, very strong player. JK just dominating constantly with this, a similar take on a same deck over and over again. For me, I think Matt is just the best, because he takes these decks that just you're like, this shouldn't work, and he just destroys with it. It's so fun to watch his builds. That's why I nominated him for Builder of the Year.
Yeah, and I love that our top players are consistently approaching the game from that mindset. Like, I think that that's a huge boon to our community, because it really does inspire, the game. That's kind of like the player level top down, where it's like, okay, when your best players are consistently being really experimental and just trying stuff and playing what they find fun, I think that does have a trickle down effect. I think it contributes to the existence of content like the Jankyard. Like, this content has a huge audience because the ethos that you guys approach the game from is really fundamentally very similar to the approach that our best players are approaching it from. There's a holistic approach to it across the whole community, because when you look at the players who represent our very, very best, they're not approaching it like Spikes. They're just not. And that does not mean that they don't play hard and they don't come to win.
Well, JK is, but not everyone.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's not the narrow view, like you had said earlier, is not to me what defines competition. It's not just there are going to be 3 or 4 meta decks and that's competition. That's what needs to define the scene or the majority of the scene.
Yeah.
Because everyone is looking, once those things are identified, for an answer, and someone is going to have to bring them. And it's always interesting to me to see who does bring it, who finds those solutions. And obviously there's a certain touch from the best players like Brian to all of a sudden come out with a deck in Auric, and it's like Carl's like, oh yeah, I think I'm like 0-3 against this deck, and it's very strong. Or even Carl, one time I played him casually, and he's like, I feel like this Noah deck is really strong. And I'm like, dude, where were you 6 months ago when I was running Noah and everyone said it was bad, and now you're saying it's strong? Like it takes time to get there for some things. Killer has done it a million times. Like he just dominated with a Ramia deck. He's had amazing Aerodels. That to me is the competition, is that everyone is not about playing what has or currently been the best deck, but everyone brings something that they believe in, can beat, like honestly believe in, not, just like, hey, we'll see what happens. But it's like, I think I do have a solution for the field. And then naturally, the way our small community is, no one or not enough people tend to bring the boogeyman, and it becomes a completely different thing. And I love it. I mean, I have always loved it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the group think. Like, there is group think, right, that goes on with our tight knit little group of players. But look at it. I mean, the group think is that Hope Creepers is broken, and you look at top 4 of Worlds, and it's not like people didn't play it. I mean, you had 2 of the top 4 ELO ranked players on Ashteki right now, and both have won. Those 2 players in Carl and Tuxedo have won there's been 8 shuffle buses. They've won 3 of them.
Yeah, incredible players.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're both on Hope Creepers and neither in the top 4. Right? And they both were close, I think. I don't know what Tuxedo finished. I know Carl was like barely out of the top 4.
He was 5th, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't make it. And we spent so much time on Discord. Oh, Hope Creepers is crazy. Duplicate needs changed. And I'm one of those people, right, on there saying like duplicate should be discard, and it's too. But
I was there too, and it took, because I lost back-to-back 3 games against Brian playing Hope Creepers in a tournament setting. So the last 3 games I've played against Brian have been in tournaments against Hope Creepers, and I've lost all of them.
Well, your first problem is playing against Brian, because
yep.
And your second problem is playing against Creepers, because you stink against them anyway, no matter what deck they're in.
I have won games against Brian.
I've won game against Brian.
Sure. Yeah.
One game.
But here's the thing. What I'm trying to get, the point I was trying to get at is I played this game against Carl. I got matched up against Carl. I was like, I have never once won against Creepers. Any deck, even before Hope existed, I've never won against Creepers. And I was like, this is going to be a thorough schlocking and I'm going to die. And I went into the thing playing my most comfortable deck, my Herald deck. And it was the best game against Creepers I've ever played. And I still lost. But I came closer to winning than I ever have. And at the end of that game, I was like, I don't necessarily feel like this was broken. And it took me just so many games against that same matchup that I don't normally do this. I'm competitive. I'm not competitive to the point where I'm going to log 10 games a week and play two-handed to try and figure out a single matchup. I'm not that level, but I'm pretty competitive. And it just took that many games, that many losses to learn this thing. And I remember dude, seriously, one of the most inspiring things that I've ever been told in this game, the 2+ years that I've been here. Carl told me, he's like, you are playing better than I've ever seen you play tonight. I didn't even have to win at that point. I was like, I have already won. Like, just to hear Carl say, you're playing so well tonight, and you learned this matchup, and you're doing really, really good. That was so inspiring to me. And like, I don't think Hope Creepers is necessarily broken. Is it really, really hard to play against? Yes. Double Down is stupid. But like, don't think it's broken. And I just think it just takes time, time and reps against these things that we don't necessarily have the volume of games happening to get there. And that's both the blessing and a curse. It's like what Jason was saying, like, that's in some ways, or sorry, that was what Treatment was saying. It's kind of a blessing, I think, is that we have this meta that's constantly shifting because people just don't necessarily want to play the same thing over and over again. And we don't have these super volume of games. We get tired of seeing this on top, and it's like, I don't want to play this. I've already won 2 tournaments with Maoni. I don't need to win another one. I'm going to play something else. Like, that doesn't happen in other games. It's one of the things I think is really cool about Ashes is like, we just naturally kind of implement rotation on our own,
Yeah, that reads to me as a feature, not a bug.
It does. And like, I think, and I'm not going to speak for Shufflebus, but this is just kind of my interpretation. So I don't know if they necessarily saw it that way. And maybe that's part of the reason why their view of like what a competitive Ashes looks like looks different than us. For me, I think we're still hella competitive. I just don't think we, are playing the same meta as often and like not as interested in playing the same decks over and over again. I don't know. Maybe that's something to do with it. But I also think maybe we should, get into the other part of the show because we're an hour and a half. But
it actually is a perfect lead-in. So given everything we've said in terms of how we either define competition or how we think the competitive scene can or should be, both of you, we've invited you for a reason, not just because you're friendly guys. You guys have an announcement to make, so I'll let you do the honors.
Yeah, we do. So we sat around after the announcement and we were kind of looking around the room being like the Ashes community as a whole. And, the more we sat on it, the more we felt like we felt a pull to sort of pick up the torch. And we knew that the idea of organizing competitive Ashes in a big way, like to even close to the degree that Shufflebus had, was really intimidating to us. Like we both have young kids. I know that Jesse does too, and all that. But we're it's a huge undertaking that Jesse and Neil did. But the more we thought about it, the intimidation and the dread of like, oh man, it's such a big commitment, started to pale in comparison to the thought of Ashes without an overarching competitive outlet. And that, we love this game. And we love each other. Like, we've been friends for such a long time, and so much of our Ashes experience has been together. Jeremy was the one who told me, hey, Ashes is coming back. And, we talked about what products we were going to buy first. And, back in 1.0, we both played 1.0, and he was the one who told me about it then too. And so, like, our friendship and Ashes are deeply connected. And the more we looked at it, the more we thought, man, we really want to do this. And so our approach to it is definitely going to be a little bit different than Jesse and Neil's. But it's also going to be the same in a lot of key ways, because what they built and what they explored is so clutch and so good for what we've got going on. And so there's a lot of elements of how they did things that we're totally going to carry forward. And then there's some stuff that we want to do a little bit differently too. And so it's called Phoenix League. That's what our competitive circuit is called. And it all leads up to a worlds level event. We don't have official Plaid Hat backing either. Shufflebus didn't have that, but you know, competitive Ashes is small and online, and everybody respected the winner of the Shufflebus Invitational as the world champion of Ashes, and that's absolutely what we want to continue going forward. The first uh, world championship level event is going to be called Collection of Ashes, which is kind of a thematic nod to what's going on with the Phoenixborn in the game. And we're going to be debuting that tournament in October of 2023. We discussed waiting the full year, but Jeremy Wise was like, nah, let's pull the trigger early on it and really ramp up things leading into October. And so that's when our world championship level event is going to happen. It's going to be October 23, Collection of Ashes. And so leading up to that, we wanted to kind of take a different approach to how you qualify for that world championship level event. It's still going to be invitation only. We really want to maintain that level of prestige and do everything that we can to make sure that Collection of Ashes is as prestigious and hard fought a competitive event as the Shufflebus invitations were. And so it is invitation only, but the ways that you achieve those invitations are going to be a little bit different. The main outlet and sort of the feature competitive play space for the Phoenix League is Phoenix League. And functionally, not to bury the lead too much here, but it's basically big boy first five league. Like, it's going to function very similarly. It's drop in, drop out, and you get a random weekly pairing. The difference is that we're going to be moving first five league to have no game reporting at all, whereas Phoenix League will have game reporting. You will track your wins and you'll submit your deck lists as well. And so, and this is kind of a reflection of the online community and the sort of the lifestyles of the people who are playing competitive Ashes most often. We know a lot of people who the scheduling of the Shufflebus tournaments has been really tough. And so having it be a little bit more flexible with a drop in, drop out competitive system that's just tracking wins over the course of the entire year seemed like it would be a good fit for the kind of players that we're looking to keep involved. And so that's functionally how it works. You drop in and you drop out of the Phoenix League, and then you'll get paired with somebody every week, and then you hit them your hardest and see what you get. And then if you get 10 wins in that league across the course of the year, then that secures your invitation to the Collection of Ashes. And then we're also going to be running quarterly, roughly. We're going to run pod tournaments that reflect kind of what Shufflebus was doing with their closed list pod tournaments. And while those are going on, we'll pause the Phoenix League pairings and kind of rally the whole competitive scene around that pod tournament. And then the other thing that we want to do is recognize the desire for alternative formats and alternative ways of playing. And we want to do that by partnering officially with community tournaments, things like Slash Fest and Ashes International League. And when those get off the ground, we're absolutely going to be reaching out to the people organizing those things and making sure that those top cuts are getting invitations to Collection of Ashes, just like our pod tournaments will have the top cut get an invitation. And then we're exploring a little bit more of this right now, but we also want to look into the Ashteki ELO system and use that as kind of a bigger net for making sure that everybody who's been investing in competitive Ashes gets an invitation. And so we'll have some sort of cutoff, whether it's like top 60 or top 40 or whatever, maybe even lower than that, of if you're ELO ranked that or higher on Ashteki, then we'll go ahead and send an invitation to those people as well. And so that's kind of the overarching plan. One thing that's important to note is that Jeremy and I just will not be able to stream and produce content at the same pace that Jesse and Neil will, and that'll be a huge loss for the community, and we know that, but we just cannot sustain multiple streams a week. Our tentative plan right now is to try to do like bi-monthly streams where we are getting submitted game footage from the Phoenix League and partner tournaments and things like that, and we're casting over those games. And so the idea is that we would have more infrequent streams, but hopefully streams that really pick the best of the best games to showcase and really get people fired up about the coolest things that have been happening in competitive that month. And so our approach hopefully is less often, but a little bit more curated and hopefully that will be a good trade-off. And so our our big heart for it is to build those bridges as best as we can and have the players who are coming in fresh off of like Red Rains mode and all these new players who are coming into the Discord to go, man, I want to get into competitive and it's scary, but this week I'll give it a shot. I'll jump into Phoenix League instead of First Five League, or maybe in addition to First Five League, and it functions exactly the way that my casual games have been going. But this time I'll play for keeps, and hopefully they'll see, because always our community is so nice and welcoming, that it's like, okay, I just got my butt kicked by Brian, and it was actually awesome. Like, and hopefully having that onboarding be so similar for the competitive experience as it is for the casual experience will help people make that leap. And we have a huge amount of optimism for the future of competitive Ashes, and that's really the whole heart behind Phoenix League and how we've organized it.
Yeah. A couple more notes. Like, one thing that we feel really strongly about is that all of our events will be closed list. We picked this because we seen the feedback from people who like have played in Shufflebus before, and like the direction Shufflebus was going towards the end with the pod tournaments and stuff, and like a lot of people really like closed list a lot. But the other thing is just that I feel like closed list is just generally more approachable and accessible for people. It doesn't require quite as much prep, quite as much studying, and quite as much maintenance for me and Jason. So, we kind of decided on that, and I think that's going to be a good change for people. But ultimately, just to add on to what Jason said, what I've been talking about this whole night is just like, I see a need for us to really bridge the gap between the casual player, the people who show up in here who are new, who are like, I'm just starting, what deck should I buy? Or like, what's the meta look like? I want to net deck something. And the people who are, playing in every Shufflebus tournament or whatever. I want to offer people as many different axes on which to compete as possible, so that it is the most accommodating it can be. If you can only really justify time to compete in Ashes once every couple months, but you can carve out, a week, then, by all means, jump into our pod tournaments. Like, you can earn a qualification to the Worlds event there. You don't have to play every week. If you like playing Ashes every week, but you got sick one week and you can't play, or maybe you're just not feeling it this week, you don't really want to get into competitive play, it's drop in, drop out format for Phoenix League. You only need 10 wins. You've got like 50 weeks or whatever. I don't know how many, but like a lot more than 10. You can earn your wins later. We really just, I think some people might see this as like dumbing down the competition. I don't personally see it that way. I think we want to make it as accessible to everyone as possible to play competitive Ashes. And one more thing too is, like, we have talked to Nick. We will get some OP prize support for this. I don't know to what extent or where we're going to put that prize support. It might be just for the pods. It might be for Worlds. We don't know, but we're getting some. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. And the last thing I want to say too is, like, we're going to be listening to you guys, because Jason and I, again, and this is like kind of my send off for Jesse and Neil. They put so much effort and time and work into developing Shufflebus that we cannot even remotely compete with. We're going to try our best to make this Phoenix League like carry the torch of Shufflebus competitive, but it's not going to be the same, and we know that, and we can't put as much effort in as they did. But we're going to be listening, and we're going to take your feedback. And
they were really good at that.
They were good at that, yeah. And we want to be good at that too. Like, tell us what you want. Tell us what works or what doesn't. We'll adjust, you know. But mostly we just want people playing Ashes. Like, every skill level, every availability, whoever you are, if you're listening to this and you like Ashes and you don't know where to start with competitive play, we want you to have a place to come play. Like, that's basically what it boils down to.
Nick isn't the only person that we've talked to this week about our plans for competitive either. You know, Jeremy and I were in a bunch of people's DMs this week because we knew that community buy-in was going to be really, really important. And so it's like, you know, this community is small enough where it's like, to us, it just seemed so stupid to try to like come up with a plan for competitive and like not run it by Carl, not run it by Brian, because we know that these are the guys who are going to be showing up to play and who are going to be repping us the hardest. And so I think like to have shown it to so many people and gone, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking, and just invariably have them all go, oh man, this sounds great, was just such an encouragement for us and such an affirmation that this is something that the community wants. And so, you know, I don't mind saying, like, I'm really proud that we seem to have a lot of buy-in on this. Like, the highlight of my week thinking about this was yesterday. Jeremy and I actually were on a phone call with Ben over in England with Red King. And, you know, his competitive participation has been really, really low. And he was sharing some of his concerns with us about, you know, just things that he really needed to be able to participate. You know, things like the way that he builds really being benefited from closeless environments, and also like his time zone being an issue. You know, he's just had a lot of obstacles towards participating in competitive, even though he's a pillar of the community and he's such a good player. And so, you know, I asked him point blank, I was like, Ben, like, you've seen the plan. Is this something that you feel like you will want to participate in? And he said, oh, absolutely. This will get me back into competitive. And that was the moment where Jeremy and I just kind of knew that we were doing something right. We're not going to do everything right. That's why we're going to be listening so closely. But, you know, we just seem to have a lot of buy-in so far, and we're really hoping that that continues to carry forward. And the biggest group of people that we want buy-in from is people who have never played competitive Ashes before, and we hope to do everything we can to make it really easy for them to jump in.
I think like it's really cool to have the flexibility for not just dropping in and dropping out, but something that is sort of persistent week over week, like First Five League, and have it more like have it mean something, have a weight to it where, you know, you can eventually maybe get invited, or, you know, at least that you see that there is that weekly possibility of competitive matches, and it being flexible for a lot of different time zones. Because I know that in the past there are people like, I think, Under Rug Swept or Asterix or Shannon / Shaz, you know, like our Australian and East Asian and, you know, Russian players in the community who have struggled to either meet the streaming schedule or just the nature of some of the pod events that are on a shorter timeline. So this is cool, and I hope that there are more people who end up joining into this Phoenix League. This is really exciting for me. Killer, do you have any thoughts? I mean, I'm gonna have to ask Dijon to wipe or reset my elo for this to actually, you know, matter, because I think I'm like bottom 80 or something like that.
That's funny. I just looked at mine.
You're top 5, aren't you?
Because I was curious about it. Not anymore. I lost to Red King earlier today.
Oh.
And in a competitive game, and it knocked me down 5 spots.
There you go.
Dang.
See,
Tough break, bro.
I'm 10 now.
it's all gonna naturally balance.
Yeah.
But,
It's a savage world out there now, man.
Yeah, I went down from 5 to 10 with the loss to him. No, all this stuff sounds great to me. I'm just really excited that there's still going to be competitive Ashes. That's, to be honest, I mean, not trying talk down anything that's been said. I don't care what format it's in. I just want to play Ashes competitively.
Word, man. Like, yeah.
So I'm just really happy that we have some, and that you guys are going to do this. And I'm always down for any type of event or, whatever it is, and just want to build some cool stuff and play it in a competitive format. So I am totally here for it.
Yeah, the Jankyard support means a lot to us. It really does.
Yeah. And we hope that this has the weight and the impact and the excitement level of like the Shufflebus events. If we don't get there right away, I hope that you guys will give us your feedback and that we can figure out how to make it better. I see this as like we're all kind of learning here. Like I've never run tournaments before. The closest we've come, Jason and I, is like running First Five League and like First Five Fridays and stuff. And I want to bring elements of that, but I still want this to be competitive Ashes. I still want people to be like, this is playing this game at the highest level. So bring your A game. That's all I have to say. Like,
it took them 2 years, right, to get there, and you guys are standing on the shoulder of giants.
Yep.
We are. We really are. Seriously, like, if we didn't have 2+ years of raw data on what competitive Ashes needs to tick that was provided to us literally by Shufflebus pretty much exclusively, there is just no way that we could have come up with a plan where so many Ashes players were looking at it and going, yeah, this sounds great to me. Like, it just would not have been possible for us to do that without having all the data that we have, thanks to Jesse and Neil. And like, we so know that, even though we don't see everything the way that they saw it, like, their contribution to the competitive scene in Ashes is completely singular. It really is.
So, pivoting, because this is great, but eventually people are going to nod off.
Oh, by the way, if you have been listening to us talk poetic about Ashes for almost 2 hours, your social prospects may be limited, and we want to break that to you gently.
Or you're stuck in traffic.
Or you're stuck in traffic, yeah.
So we started pretty heavy, and we've talked about something exciting. Now let's pivot to just the best time of the year, the least important thing, and in some ways the most important.
The most important.
Depending on whether you're one of our listeners, then this might be the most important event of the year. Jankfest is coming up. I'm excited.
Matt Bowers says over and over and over throughout the year that all the other tournaments don't mean anything to him and that he's just geared up for Jankfest. And like, I know he's joking, but it makes me laugh every time. Like, and it just like, I'm sorry, we've been talking about competitive for almost 2 hours now, but like, we have so many Timmies in this community, and it just like Jeremy and I finding a way to give those guys room to flex is just so cool. So we love Jankfest.
It's like how many people are just like, yeah, I mean, I won Worlds, but I just really want that Builder of the Year playmat.
Yeah.
I mean, the cap in my hat is still beating Matt Bowers in my very first tournament of any kind, and that was Jankfest. And I'm going to hold on to that, and then we'll see what happens this year.
Yeah.
So I will hold off making official announcements about Jankfest until after this episode has aired. I want this to be people's first opportunity to hear it. But if Cactus and Treatment, if you guys don't mind, I'll just go right into our honorary mentions and our official nominees.
Yes. I mean, unless sure. Killer, do you have anything else before we get to the nominations?
Jankfest is awesome. And if
that's all you need. There you go. New tagline.
If I'm not one of these nominees, then I'll have something to rant about failing at. So either way,
we gotta give you content.
Yeah.
I mean,
you do need content, Cactus. So
right.
All right. So the votes actually changed a lot over the last just 48 hours as people got last minute nominations in. We had over 85 individual nominations
Wow.
submitted.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it like really, really cool stuff. And so I'm going to go through a list of 4 players right now who received multiple nominations above a certain threshold, and were just consistently complimented in the commentary. But I've narrowed down the actual nominees that we'll be voting for to 3, because almost 50% of the total votes were for just 3 players. And so to me, that really suggested that the community saw something in the 3 nominees that was head and shoulders even above the other people that those same people would have nominated. And so it felt most natural to me to sort of separate it into a group of players that has an honorary mention, and then these 3 players that the community really consistently was recognizing as being incredible builders. And so we'll start with our honorable mentions, and I've kind of curated some of the commentary, and then we'll kind of talk for a little bit about each of the nominees. So the first honorable mention, and it's hard to believe that this person is an honorable mention. It really, really is. But that just speaks to some of the accomplishments that have been made this year in deck building. Our first honorable mention player is our reigning champ, Red King.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah.
So some of the things that were said, Red King, the reigning champ, continues to challenge the community's expectations and assumptions of the game, proving time and time again that his style of deck building is a force to be reckoned with, and he's building on axes unseen by almost everyone else. Somebody else said, seeing a Red King deck that includes 3 cut the strings is the kind of stuff that I never thought that I'd find anyone else into. So for me, Red King's deck building is literally inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him on a few episodes already because he has kindly submitted generally for each episode, and it is on a different level. I mean, there are some things that I can look at and be like, oh yeah, I like this, I could play this, I get it. And then there are others where I'm like, you're just on a different level of thought of how to even pick the first 5. Like when I see 15 ready spells, I'm lost.
Yeah, my brain is broken.
He's buck wild, man. Yeah, he's awesome.
His coolest deck that I've seen lately that I think is incredibly strong is his Rin Whale deck, backed up by Small Sack and String Mage and just a ton of knights. I don't know if he built it specifically when Hope Creepers started to become a problem, but I've seen Schmendrix play it a bunch, and I've seen him play it, and I've played against it, and it is so painful and frustrating, in a good way. Like it's strong, and it stumps your expectation and even like knowledge of what to do. It's similar to a monk prison-esque deck where you're just like, I don't know if I have solutions. Like, what do I do? And I think if he joins the Phoenix League and is playing more competitively and he uses that deck, I think it'll put a lot of people on the back foot.
Yeah. Moving right along. Go ahead, Cactus. Yeah, no, you're good.
Dude beat me at lunchtime. I played Mayoni today. Beat me at lunchtime with Iron Rhino. Man,
nice.
Like,
What are you gonna do?
That's all you could say. Like he's played. He first 5'd Iron Rhino and he beat my Mayoni, and he didn't just beat. He crushed it. Right. So, I mean,
awesome.
That's him, man. It's all. I can't say anything else about it.
Moving right along. Let's just get this out of the way. Let's not talk too much about this one. But I actually got nominated a lot, and I kind of fit into this honorary mention category based on the numbers. Some of the things that people said about me, says Impossible German has single-handedly set the stage for new players to approach deck building through the Adventuring Party series. 4 sets in, this series continues to be an invaluable asset to the community, the best, most welcoming deck builder to contribute towards engaging new players. That means a lot to me because engaging new players and like getting their feet wet in deck building is the whole reason that I spend so much time on those stupid articles. So to see that recognized really, really was humbling. Yeah, it really was.
Here, man. Those things are sweet.
Absolutely,
Fantastic
I agree.
job
You were one of my nominations as well. Like
Oh, thanks, man.
I just, like I still am kind of blown away that you made 4 of those damn things. Like how do you keep finding new ways to make these decks? And the thing I love about them so much is that they're so, like, they have identities, they are thematic, and they aren't overwhelming with strategy. There's sometimes you pick up a net deck from someone and it's like, I have no idea what to do. Like, you just look at it and you're like, this is hieroglyphics, But
Yeah.
like every adventuring party deck, you can look at it and you be like, oh, I see what's going on here, and that's just invaluable for new players. So like, hats off to you. I honestly wish you had become one of the nominations, but honorable mention, well earned.
I'm gonna add on quickly because I also nominated you.
Oh, wow.
Having gone through the process with Shadowfire of creating a deck for every Phoenixborn, trying to find that unique identity, or in our case, putting a spin on it that we haven't seen a dozen times before, was incredibly difficult. And then to play all of them at least a few times and then go back and refine some of them, and even scrap entire ideas and rebuild. And we didn't even have a constraint of like, I want to build this with one collection. We were just like, if you want to use Sally in 10 different decks or 15 different decks, you can. And so it's really admirable to me to like look at the AP decks, even though I haven't played many of them, and just like, that's a ton of effort, and it is so invaluable to the community and to new players. So I think it's well deserved at the very minimum, an honorable mention.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah. Next up, man, this is the honorable mention that got closest to being a full nominee. So much mention of this guy, and just completely deserved. It's Redentor. Redentor, because he was able to push Jericho, a typically below par PB, into the limelight using Fighting Spirit and Hoppers. And then after that, he just made a lot of generally good decks, contributed immensely to the meta by introducing new and exciting archetypes. I have been like the first guy on the Jericho is bad train for a long time. Like, my arguments were that like her use cases compared to other Phoenixborns were just so narrow, and then to like seeing Redentor make that run with the Hopper Jericho was just like, and again, these are cards that have been around, and it's like, what were we doing? Like, why wasn't anybody doing this? Like, the guy just, what an impressive year for Redentor. I was really happy to see him recognized.
Yeah, I agree. He's been very impressive. I think I've only gotten to play against Redentor once. It was a really great game. I had a lot of fun, and Redentor is just really impressing me, both as a deck builder, as a player, and as a community member. Like, just fantastic all around. So
yeah, great guy to have around. And then a surprising addition to the honorable mention list. This is a guy that I nominated and just respect a whole lot. It is pillar of the community, Brian B. Little summary: consistently pushing the competitive meta. This year, Brian's win count started really reflecting how great a player he actually is, but he's always pushed the envelope with known good Phoenixborns. His Cole is a force to be reckoned with, and he led the way in refining hope. There's so much truth there.
Yeah, I mean, Brian I respect him so much because he's what I wish I could be, in terms of like, he explores ideas that either haven't been seen or have been seen, but then he's able to refine them into something really good. And that's the touch that I sort of mentioned before is just like he can take ideas that you've sort of seen and then somehow make them just top tier, and that's awesome. And he doesn't just stick to one thing. I mean, I've seen him I think I've been matched up with him in every pod event for at least the last 4 months. I've seen him on Cole, I've seen him on Airedale, I've seen him on Hope. He's just got it all, and he's always good with everything. So well deserved for him.
Yeah, I actually think that Brian is really overrated as a deck builder because you could hand them a pile of literally 30 random cards, and just by virtue of him playing mistake-free ball, he would probably still beat you. So, like, does it matter what he built? You know, like, he plays perfectly.
He could play Koloff in a Shufflebus Worlds and probably not.
Probably too fun.
There's a reason he's in the final of the Koloff tournament
again
twice now, or like there's a good reason for that. But I'm being honest, I don't remember who I nominated because my memory's terrible. But I think I nominated Brian, and I'm always just like very impressed with how much efficiency he's able to kind of milk out of things, and he's he was kind of the first person I saw doing like the salamander snapper wishing wing stuff, and that's such just a high efficiency engine that I've borrowed and used on a lot of my builds. He was also the first person I saw doing like the Tristan Rile the Meek stuff, which for whatever reason I never like considered with Prism Tetra and stuff, and then he did it to me and I was like, wow, that's really stinking cool. And he, that Cole list he has is obviously really awesome, and he's refined that over the course of a long time now. And just always impressed with what he's building, and I've taken a lot of things from him.
I feel like people forgot this a little bit because it never made its way over to YouTube, but Brian won AIL this year on Asaria.
Oh God, that was like one of the best games I've ever watched between him and Carl.
It was freaking awesome. I was so sad that it never made its way over to YouTube. I got to cast that game with Jesse, and it was, oh man, what a watch! Like, it was awesome.
That wasn't just pro level play. That was pro level mind games, and like I think there was like one round where it was just like almost like a pass back and forth type of thing. Like, that was such a good game to watch. It really is a shame it's not recorded in perpetuity.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the show. It's our official nominees for Builder of the Year. After this show gets published, we'll release the ballot along with the honorable mentions, but the votes will come down between these three players. So the first player nominated has been very open that this nomination was going to be the highlight of his year, and so I couldn't be more pleased to announce it. It is Carl Diaz. The summary here, Carl has built a whole suite of awesome decks this year. His work building out the Mirror Spirit decks in particular has been really solid and has pushed the game forward. He was the first one to really crack Rowan. Carl is easily producing the most competitive lists in mass. The combination of unique decks while also being a meta leader is truly impressive.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
No, that's
a really good summary of
sums
everything
Carl
he's
up
done
perfectly. His volume, I think it's easy to miss his volume because most of us don't even play anywhere near the number of games he plays in a given week, and so you can miss like the amount of work and the number of decks that are really solid in a given week. It's crazy and it's impressive.
It's important to note that like when Tristan and Rowan got spoiled, everybody was hyping up how Tristan was going to make this big competitive splash, right? And he was going to, the Tsunami Shot was amazing, and we can magnify, fish and ruby cobras and bears and all this stuff, and we can, rile the meek and all that crap. And everyone was on Tristan, and nobody said anything, right, I felt like anyway, about Rowan in competitive formats. People were like, hey, Rising Horde's pretty good. And then Carl builds this Rowan deck and just like takes everyone
top fours
immediately, kind of. Yeah. And just like that like the way that deck works together. It's like a beautiful thing. It's set up. It draws cards. It has all that self-sacrifice engine, which is so great because it heals Rowan to keep the game going longer, and it makes the Chimera able to come out with Air's End over again. It just, and then you have Generosity, which both draws cards to find discovery and heals. It works so well. Like when you look at the list, it's just one of those decks that you don't see very often, but like you go down through and it's like, man, this stuff just fits perfectly together. And it was a beautiful list. I mean, he's obviously built more than just that, but that one particularly to me was like, man, this thing's like a work of art.
Yeah, it's the intersection of like competitiveness and true like creativity. Like he really is out in left field so much at the time. It's awesome to see. One of the highlights of my Ashes career was there was like a 3 or 4 week period where Carl was just really hammering in, like doing a lot of test games with this, I don't mind saying it, phenomenally stupid Xander deck where he was like pitching his whole deck to get triple fallen and then like using Memorialize. Like it was super duper dumb. But like he kept slamming it over and over and over again. And I beat him like 3 times in a row, and it was really good for my ego. Because it just wasn't quite working. But like the reason that Carl is able to top 4 with Rowan out of left field is because like he's out there putting in the work, and he's like giving me ego boosting wins against his stupid Xanders so that he can find the stuff that's actually going to have play. Like he just puts in the work, and he's so creative, and shares a lot of attributes with Brian, and that like he'll take these decks, refine them to an inch of their lives, and then he'll go into the tournament and make no mistakes. And you wonder why he's consistently in the top. It's because he does the research and then he plays it really, really well.
Let's not forget the like 2, or I won't be facetious and say like the next day, but within a week of Demona being released, Carl was like, yeah, so I'm on Demona Fallen and it's currently at like 18-1, so I think I'm going to retire the idea. And it's like, Jesus, like I don't even have that many plays with some Phoenixborn, much less a given deck. And he's always at like 80-90% win rates with these amazing ideas.
Yeah, he's awesome. The next player on my list is somebody that I voted for, and was probably the player that I was personally most nervous about heading into Jankfest nominations, because this is a player that I felt really strongly needed to be recognized for deck building. And I was worried that it wouldn't happen. I was worried that the community wouldn't see it. I was wrong. This player got a ton of nominations, and I think deservedly so. It's JK007. JK007 for being a master at the competitive level of deck building and constantly, I love this phrase, outmaneuvering everyone else. All of the small adjustments and revisions to his Brennan deck that keeps winning tournaments is way more impressive than people give him credit for. To build a winning recipe and keep winning, even when people know the general deck that you're going to be bringing deserves more attention than JK gets.
Yeah, I voted for JK too. That one I do remember, and that's why, right? Like it's he's really been on one deck.
He started on Lulu actually. Like I think that was less than a year ago.
Yeah, you're probably right. But he, like, it's such a simple idea. Right, with what he's doing. When you look at it, you sit back, it's like, man, this is so simple. But, like, I never thought in a million years, and I don't know why, because, again, seems really simple when, in hindsight, to put Meteor in a Brennan deck. Like, never crossed my mind.
Nope.
And it makes so much sense, right? And, like, in Law of Fear, another card. Like, it's the perfect Brennan card.
Yeah, I vividly remember Matt was retelling his story from Gen Con, and he talked about sitting down across from JK, and he looked at his dice pool and he saw the divine, and Matt said that like his brain went, "That's Lightbringer," and as soon as he like made that connection, he was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna see if I can make it to round 3." Like Matt was able to recognize instantly that that single decision to pivot his Brennan and include Lightbringer was enough to hose him, and he knew that he was going to lose, and he's like, I'm just playing to rack the score up. Like, to me, that story is really illustrative of why JK007 deserves to be nominated specifically for Builder of the Year and not just be recognized for his piloting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure part of your summary was words that I wrote, because like I felt the same way. I was like, he's just on another level for like the idea, not just of like building a deck, but like refining it to a diamond. Like, and then when that diamond loses a little bit of its luster, he's polishing it up, you know, and just like the fact that tournament after tournament after tournament, as people keep on just slamming against his deck, trying to figure out what is making this work, how do I beat it, and then as soon as they figure out, or they start to figure out like maybe this will beat Brennan, he pivots and he makes it better. And it's just like unbelievable. Like just very, very this is like what spike deck building is at its peak, and we don't recognize that enough in the, you know, Johnny Timmy circles. It's really good.
I guarantee if I had posted a Brennan deck and I suggested that the first 5 was all burn, that people would be like, yeah, that's pretty janky. And meanwhile, you know, JK won whichever Shufflebus it was using that exact strategy. And it's just like one of the flexibility of the first 5 that everyone, you know, up until that point was expecting, oh, Huntmaster, Herder, whatever. And that was just like complete pivot and slammed a game, you know, ending in whatever it was, 12 dice or 15 dice.
Yep. So 2 of our 3 are Carl Diaz and JK, and that leaves us with one final official nominee for Builder of the Year. This was the player who got the most individual nominations, was the overall most recognized builder of this year. Our final nominee is Mr. Killer Cactus.
Yeah, boy.
So I just win, right? That's just stop.
Yeah. We won't vote. No. The summary here says,
no. Wow, that's overwhelmingly cool.
That was so well deserved.
It's overwhelmingly cool.
Loved tallying those votes and just seeing you consistently stay at the top of the pack. It says Killer Cactus has been a consistently active deck builder through tournaments, Jankyard, and so many thematic decks over the year. Tons of innovation in his deck builds, playing with cards that are generally unpopular and finding the interesting synergies. Killer outputs like a mad lad and is very unique in his builds. Man, I really hope, as a guy who leads a Jankyard podcast, that you take that compliment to heart. Like, dude, you put stuff out, and I'm just like, this guy, like, you know, you said that Red King was thinking on a totally different axis, and really, I see a lot of the same elements in your builds. Like, I think back to like that spin down Jessa that was just totally out of left field, and nobody's playing spin down, and then you're like, you know, you're doing things that other people are just not doing, and you know, a lot of these compliments that you've made towards the other builders in the last few minutes, like, they're things that also reflect how you approach the game, and I think that the community was super excited to recognize that, and I'm really happy to get to tell you in person that you got nominated.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's, you know, something I've been trying to work towards too, and been vocal about. Like, this game is it's the deck building is what gets me here, right? Like, I love to play competitive Ashes. I love to play the game, but building decks is what's fun for me in any game, and it's why I'm so drawn to Ashes, right? Because it's so rewarding, and so like it just feels so good to build a deck in this game. And there's so many different things you can do, and it's just it's very cool and very overwhelming for everybody to like the stuff that I'm doing when I get to work 20 minutes early every morning and have a random idea in the shower before I left that day and threw a deck together and just chatted about it for a little bit. So yeah, it's very, very humbling and very, very thankful for everyone that actually likes the stuff that I'm putting out.
Treatment, you're making content with Cactus, almost every single week. Would you say the community has made a mistake here?
No. Yeah, Killer was. If there had only been one nomination, he was the first one I put, I think, in my list, and it was the first one I thought about, just because he basically does what I want or wish I could do, which is not just like, I think I have a lot of creative ideas, but like the ideas that Killer puts out, aside from the volume, which is like nearly one a day, those ideas are already, at least to me, feel like they're at the second level of refinement. Like they're not, super tested or all super competitive decks, but it's like there's the idea and then there's already the trimmed fat. And it's always impressive to me, the different synergies, the different outside the box thinking, the ways that it takes, which we've talked about a lot, a perhaps sometimes janky idea, but because it is not the entire deck, it is a core piece of the functionality that then makes everything else amazing. Like you said, it's very much like Red King. I just admire Killer a ton, and so this is totally well deserved. I'm really happy that he got the most votes, and I hope he wins.
Yeah, man. So that's our Builder of the Year nominees. You got Carl Diaz, JK007, and Killer Cactus.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was already a pleasure having our very first guests on the podcast. It was also a pleasure covering a lot of stuff in depth. I'm sure if we had infinite time, we probably could have talked another hour or two, because it was easy. It was nice to talk to you guys, and I think it's fun when we all have slightly different takes on the same thing. Like I said, I think we all want the best for this community, for this game, and I'm really excited for Phoenix League. And I hope that other people are as well, not just the active members of the community, but people who, pop in only sometimes. I hope that they are encouraged by the ideas that you guys have presented and the approach that you're taking with the different axes, as you called it, to the competitive scene. I'm hopeful for 2023, but even more so for Jankfest, which is very soon. And so that's what I'm going to put my full thoughts on, and hope I can come up with something that makes you guys happy, or at least laugh.
Yeah, I'll echo all of that, and great to have you guys on. It's I was lucky enough to meet Chaos Theory at Gen Con this year, and we had a great time there. And if there's one other person in the community that I'd like to meet one day, it's you, German. So you got to get to a con sometime so we can hang out. There's been so many times on the Discord where like you're saying something, I'm like, I was gonna say that, and now I don't have to.
Well, and the other thing that I love about you, man, is that like it feels to me like every time we get matched up, whether it's in a tournament or whether it's a match techie game, like it is just so flipping close. Like I consistently have the most entertaining games of Ashes with you. I think for some reason, like we've just progressed kind of along the same axes, and you're a way more creative builder than I am, but like I feel like we're very evenly matched in terms of like skill when we get into the game. And so like, it's just always close and always a blast. And like, I like don't breathe the entire time that we're playing. And then the dust settles and I'm like, whoo, that was awesome. Like, it was great.
Yeah. I echo that 100%. It's always super, super, super fun and, stressful in that great way to play with you. So, was really happy to have you guys on the show, talk with you for a couple hours about this game that everybody here loves. And can't wait to see what the next year has in store.
Yeah.
For sure. Thanks for having us so much. And before we sign off, just want to say, Jesse and Neil, thank you so much.
Oh, God. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, 100%, guys. Thanks for everything you did.
Absolutely. All right. So, from the 3 Shufflebus invitees plus me, the odd one out, we're signing off this episode. And Killer, do you want to do the honors?
Not only if one of our guests doesn't want to do it.
Oh, okay. Do you guys know the tagline? I hope you do.
They might not even know the sign off.
I don't know the sign off. I'm sorry.
Oh man, this is oh no.
Called them
I'm
out.
on the
All
spot.
right, that's fine. I'll do it.
It's all right.
I'll do it.
Okay, go ahead. You do it.
If you're not janky, you're stanky. It's always good. Thanks, guys.
It is. It's always good.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Have a good night.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Awesome.